Our text today will be found in Luke 7:44 through 47. We'll discuss the entire context of this, but uh, the opening text will come from Luke 7:44 through 47, reading from the English Standard Version. It says, Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, Do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. Using for a title, Love at the Feet of Jesus. Love at the feet of Jesus. As we celebrate and observe Valentine's Day today, we do recognize and remember that Saint Valentine is a real person, right? Legend has it, and there's a lot of debate, especially within the Catholic Church community, of the legend of Saint Valentine is one of one person or a combination of two. There were so many priest named Valentine back at this time, and this particular legend goes that he was a saint of courtly love, and he was martyred for helping Christian couples get married, which was supposedly prohibited at this time in Rome, and which is why he had become known as the patron saint of courtly love. And of course, this legend has evolved into what we know as Valentine's Day, and be commercially celebrated for couples and that celebrate love and gives gifts to one another. And sometimes this day is also resented by those who don't have a significant other to celebrate. And so, in that way, I wanted to share a discussion of love that we can all have in common. Whether you're married, whether you are dating, whether you are single, whether you are divorced or widowed, there is a degree and capacity of love that can be expressed that all of us can share in, and that is love at the feet of Jesus. There are three perspectives in this entire story that I want to share, and that is love expressed, love contrasted, and love commended. Love expressed, love contrasted, and love commended. You heard the song that preceded the message by CeCe Winans, beautiful gospel artist, and she sings from the perspective of this woman in the song Alabaster Box. And it begins, the discourse of this begins in Luke 7:36. And so, in first discussing this love expressed, we see the beginning of the story. Luke 7:36 through 38 says, One of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and reclined at table. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair, with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. So, a couple of observations we want to make about the scene here. First of all, let's talk about the Pharisee. The term Pharisee means separated ones, and the Pharisees were a large and influential religious party of the day, and they wielded significant political influence. And so when we think about the Pharisees, we don't think about just one or two people that may be mentioned throughout the Bible. We should put that in a context of representing a large uh, party and a large organized group of individuals that were known for their rigid adherence to Jewish traditions and their knowledge of Jewish law. And so they were responsible for not only knowing the law, knowing the Levitical law, but interpreting it, and then in many cases adding to it in order to provide additional context, right? And so, what tends to happen in situations like that is there could be a twisting of the original intent of the law in order to make it fit what the current culture is of the day. And so, when you talk about how the law was written in Moses' time all the way to Jesus' time, and all of the various Pharisees of this that sat under the period of the Second Temple, we can see how Jesus would come back and challenge some of the things that the Pharisees would interpret about the Old Testament law. Right? He's been known to tell them, well, you say love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, hate your enemy is never found in Levitical law. It's something that the Pharisees have added to it over time. And that's why he would challenge some of those things. And so, of course, they would oppose Jesus because his teaching would oppose their interpretations, the interpretations of a venerated, respected, in some cases, group of individuals who had an encyclopedic knowledge of the law and were responsible for adhering to it and holding people accountable to it. And so we have this man who could be representative of the larger group of Pharisees that questioned the credibility of Jesus. And he invited Jesus to his house. We don't know the motivation behind this. It could have been a genuine attempt to just get to know more about what Jesus' ministry was, or it could have been to further question him and determine his true credibility. Whatever the motivation is, right behind this, we see and hear of this woman coming to the table where Jesus was reclining. And the only thing we know about her, according to the scripture, is that she's a sinner. Well, of course, we know she's a woman, but we also know that she's a sinner. We don't know her name. Some early commentators have suggested that it could have been Mary Magdalene. There was a story of another woman that preceded this that lead early commentators to believe it was Mary Magdalene, but there is no scriptural support and there's no geographical support to follow that. So it is safe to know, safe to conclude that this woman was not Mary Magdalene. We don't know who she was. She's not given a name. She is not giving any distinctive characteristics other than the fact that she is a sinner. Now, that could fall upon any person of that time. Anyone could be called a sinner. So, why is it significant that they called her a sinner? Uh, because, in the context of this story, it should be understood that they're trying to show that she was a known sinner or a notorious sinner. And we don't know what the sin was either. You know, we don't know exactly what sin or what sinful characteristics she was known for. Whatever it was, she was known. The Pharisee recognized her when she walked in. The people that were potentially gathered at the time knew who she was and knew what she was known for, the kind of woman, the kind of sinner she was. But there is no specifics around it. All we know is that to some degree, she was a known sinner. But in knowing that, of course, she knows that if they know that about her, then she likely knows that they know that about her. And even with that knowledge, she came to know that Jesus was in town and came into this gathering. There are a lot of questions about how she got in there, how was she allowed in there, and some traditions suggest that anytime a known rabbi is invited into town, it becomes more of a public event and not a private gathering, and therefore everyone was welcome to be in attendance, not necessarily host or have any significant role, but at least be around. And it is very possible that that is how she was at least allowed to be in that area. And what she presents changes the scope of the gathering, because what may have been a simple conversation between Jesus and this Pharisee turns into an emotional outpouring of this woman. She comes to him with humility, affection, and devotion. She wets his feet with her tears. She dries it with her hair. She anoints his feet with oil. Everything that was a part of her, she places at the feet of Jesus. Everything that would have been considered valuable, the depth of emotion of her tears, the quality of life in her hair, the substance that she had in the oil, the expensive oil, some translations say, is offered and placed at the feet or on the feet of Jesus. The feet, the bottom, the basest part of the body that had been tracking dust and dirt beneath and around his feet in his sandals. And so she takes everything that would be considered valuable and places it on the feet of Jesus. Now, many commentators believe that this woman may have been previously converted by Jesus' teachings and used this opportunity to express her love and appreciation to him. And I come to agree with that assertion just from a doctrinal standpoint, and we'll talk about it about why that is a little later on. But it would make sense that if this woman was converted from the notorious sin that she was known for, why she would express her love in such a way. And so we have this woman changing the dynamic of the scene because of who she is and who and how she had come to know Jesus. And so, in this expressed love, in the changing dynamic of what was happening here, we see a contrast. We see how her love was expressed, and then we see how the contrast, the contrary response to this love. And in love contrasted, we see as we read the story further, Luke 39 through 46. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for he is a sinner. And Jesus answering said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he answered, say it, teacher. A certain moneylender had two debtors. He owed one, one owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt for both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, you have judged rightly. Then, turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. We see a very different response from the Pharisee than what was expressed by the woman. Now, I ask you, if you had seen that, if you had seen the emotion expressed, if you had seen the length that she went to express her love, would you have such a stoic and rigid response? Yes, it may depend on who you were. If you were as arrogant as that Pharisee, maybe you would have. because he had such an arrogant response toward the woman and such a derisive response toward Jesus. Because he knew of this woman's reputation, he gave and offered no credibility or sympathy to what this woman expressed. And it created probably a more derisive approach toward Jesus because he probably already came in with a preconceived notion of Jesus, and this event validated what he already felt. And so he questions Jesus' credentials. He should know who she was and the type of woman she was, whatever it was, the type of sinner she was. So he already had problems with Jesus, and this just solidified it because if you, I already wondered if you were a prophet, and looking at this, if you were really a prophet, then you would know the type of woman that was touching you and would have nothing to do with it. And so he was thinking this to himself, and Jesus, of course, reads his mind and uh, says, "You know what? I got something to say to you." In true to form, Jesus makes his point in a parable. Tells a story about two debtors, and these the debtors owed them money. Various translations calls it pence, the denarius, pieces of silver, whatever it was. One denarius was worth a day's wage, and so one of the debtors owed about half a year's salary, and the other one owed about 2 months' salary. So one debt was significantly larger than the other, but neither one of them, regardless of the amount, had anything to pay, and so their debts were forgiven. And so the question became, who will love the creditor more? Well, the answer is from the Pharisee, the one who owed more. Of course, I owed significantly more. I'm going to love you more because my debt was greater than the others. And Jesus says, "You judge rightly." And so he takes that moment to call out the Pharisee by using his own words against him, by saying, "You're right. Now, look at this woman. From the time I walked in, you did not offer me the most common pleasantries that were common for the day. It was common in that day when you had a visitor to offer them water for their feet. They didn't have boots or enclosed shoes at the time. They had single soled sandals that were just strapped with strings. And so, in walking through the conditions of that time that were desert conditions, you would collect dust and dirt on your feet, and they would collect around your toes because of the sweat that would gather around your feet. So, it was common to offer them some water for their feet, to pour the dust and the dirt off of their feet. It was just hospitable. They would offer them a hospitable kiss on the cheek as a hospitable welcome, and then they would offer oil for their head to clean themselves up from whatever journey they were on. It was just common, and this Pharisee who knew these things didn't even offer Jesus that. He didn't offer the most common pleasantries, probably because he already had a preconceived resentment for Jesus in the first place. Didn't offer these things. And this woman, the very thing that this Pharisee did not offer, she offered to Jesus in the most beautiful and in depth way. She didn't have any water, but she had her tears became her water. She didn't have a towel to dry his feet off, so her hair became her towel. And she had no oil, so she used her perfume, and her alabaster box became her oil. So everything that she had, she didn't have what the Pharisee could should have offered, but she had what she could offer. And humbly she offered all of those things at the feet of Jesus. Pure emotion, pure affection, pure devotion. Let me ask you this. Do we sometimes neglect to offer Jesus our own devotion because we don't feel like we have the same debt as others? This Pharisee likely saw himself as a venerated individual. He not only interpreted the laws, but he was responsible and part of those who wrote additional laws and additional interpretations of the law. Because he saw himself as higher than this woman, then I don't need to offer these pleasantries to Jesus. I don't have a debt to Jesus. I don't have this type of debt. I don't owe him anything. And maybe sometimes when we look at ourselves against others, we don't devote ourselves to Jesus the same way as others because I'm not like that. I'm not a murderer and I'm not a whoremonger and I'm not a drunkard and I'm not a drug dealer and I don't do stuff like that. And the same way, we have lost the desire to give ourselves to Jesus in such a way because we don't see ourselves in that light anymore. When we repented and now we go to church every Sunday and we pack the right Bible and we sing the right hymns, we don't give ourselves at the feet of Jesus because we don't look at ourselves the way that this woman saw herself. She recognized how great the forgiveness was and devoted herself to Jesus in response. And so he tells this Pharisee that you didn't offer me anything. This woman recognized her sin. She recognized the debt, but she also recognized the forgiveness. And that's how we see the love commended. In Luke 7:47 through 50, it says, therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who loves or is forgiven little, loves little. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. And those who are at table, we can begin to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sin? And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And so when we look at her actions, we have to remind you again that she was likely previously converted. Why do I come to that conclusion? Because her actions did not produce her forgiveness. That would be work. We know that we are not saved by works or forgiven by works. And so her actions did not produce her forgiveness, but it was his forgiveness that produced her actions. And therefore, she was acting in response to a previous conversion and expressing her love in that way. And this Pharisee who had a high perception of himself did not feel the need to offer anything to Jesus. And now this woman, saints, recognized the significance of the depth and the greatness of the forgiveness and responded appropriately. So this is a woman who owed by comparison of the parable, she would be the one that owed 500 denarii. She would be the one that owed the greater debt and therefore loved Jesus more because she recognized the significance of the forgiveness. If this woman can offer all she had to Jesus, who at this time was known as a prophet and a rabbi, what will you offer to Jesus who showed his love for us on the cross for our forgiveness? See, I want to say this to you because when you look at it now from in retrospect and in hindsight and reading additional scriptures that have been written, I'm reminded of Romans 3:22 through 24, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe, for there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. And so, what are we saying here? Is that if you sit the Pharisee next to the sinful woman, even though from a monetary or quantitative standpoint, you could say that the Pharisee owed 50 denarius and the woman owed 500 denarius, but in the eyes of Jesus, they all have the same debt. They all have the same debt, and therefore all could have been forgiven in the same way. And so, what I'm saying to you is that I'm glad that we don't know more about this woman than that she was just a sinner. I'm glad that the Bible only says that she's a sinner because This woman can represent every single one of us. This woman represents for us every degree of sin that could have possibly existed in our lives. This woman can represent for us every spectrum of sin, whether you are a murderer or a new convert. This woman represents for us what she saw in herself as a depth of sin and the greatness and value of its forgiveness. And so, whether you have been a drug dealer or a whoremonger or an adulterer, or maybe you just made some errors in judgment and maybe you just decided not to follow Jesus for a period of time, regardless if your debt is 50 denarius or 500 denarius, you need to fall at the feet of Jesus, because there is nothing more that you can offer than yourself, nothing more that you can offer than your tears when you recognize what Jesus gave so that you could be forgiven. Why wouldn't you express your love at the feet of Jesus? When you think about where you came from and what he did to bring you to him, why wouldn't you fall at the feet of Jesus? When you think about everything, I mean, and look back at your life. I know what I do. I bring myself to tears. I don't care how many degrees I've earned. I don't care how many certifications I have. I don't care how many churches I've pastored. When I think about and look back at where I come from, all I can do is to weep at what Jesus gave so that I could be forgiven. And it makes me think about how we look at ourselves in comparison to others, because then we start quantifying the degree of our own sin. We start thinking about, well, it's not as bad because I'm not like that. I don't have to do as much because I didn't do as much. I don't have to offer as much because I didn't sin as much. But all have sinned and fall short of the Lord. James says, even if you obey every part of the law but sin in one point, you're guilty of it all. And so, in the same way, that 50 is equal to 500 and that 500 is equal to 50, because in the eyes of Jesus, we all require his grace. And so, what I'm encouraging you to do today is look at yourself in light of the love of Jesus, in light of his forgiveness, and look at that and express that love, that affection, that devotion at the feet of Jesus, no matter who you are. No matter how long you've been saved, no matter your reputation and status in the church or in society, let us always reflect on the greatness of God's forgiveness in juxtaposition to the gravity of our sin, and radically express our love with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, and all of our strength. Every part of you from the inside out needs to prostrate yourself at the feet of Jesus when you recognize how great your debt and how great his forgiveness is, even to this day. Love at the feet of Jesus. You don't have to be married, you don't have to be single or divorced to recognize that this love is universal, that this love is uh, massive for all of us. And we can all express our love in response to the greatness of God.